killed hundreds of children after receiving foster care from their parents. Estimates may be 300 to 400 or more, including infants and children. Amelia Dyer was dubbed the Witch in real life. On March 30, 1896, the barge driver picked up a package on the River Thames, in the town of Reading, England. Inside was the body of a newborn baby girl strangled by a white bandage. The package had a stamp from Templemead Station in Bristol, and the sender's name was Thomas and the address. The police then went to the home of Amelia Dyer, who used many fake names including Thomas, who had been sentenced to re-education for child neglect. She was placed on suspicion, undercover, and arrested a month later. Born Amelia Hobley in 1836, Dyer came from a small village near Bristol, England. Her father was a master shoemaker with his own shop. Dyer lived a life more fortunate than many in Victorian Britain. She was fed, clothed and educated, developing a love of literature. Sadly, her mother became seriously ill with the side effects of typhus and was driven mad. The young Amelia was expected to tend to her ailing parent, enduring her violent rages and frequently being beaten. It has been suggested that the seeds of Dyer's own later violence and insanity were sown at this time. When her mother passed away, 10-year-old Amelia was sent to live with an aunt in Bristol. As a teenager, she became apprenticed to a corset maker, and her life seemed to be following a mundane but respectable route. At 24 she met and married a man much older than herself, George Thomas. Early in that marriage, Dyer made a decision that was to change the course of her life and seal the fate of hundreds of children. She decided to train as a nurse. At the start of her nursing career, Dyer was introduced to a midwife, Ellen Danes. Danes made her living as a baby farmer. When Amelia was left widowed and with a young child in 1869, she realized that, like her friend, she could make a better living taking in illegitimate children. Baby farming as an industry received a huge boost when an 1834 Act of Parliament absolved men of any responsibility towards their illegitimate children. This left unmarried mothers in a terrible predicament. For most, there were only three choices: starvation, the workhouse, or a baby farm. Dyer's career was long and very profitable, spanning 30 years. She is suspected of killing over 400 children during that period. Even childbirth and marriage did little to slow her in her tracks. In 1872 Amelia married William Dyer and gave birth to two more children, Mary and, known as Polly, and William. Moving from town to town, she sometimes spent short periods in mental asylums, usually at times when it was convenient for her to lie low. Whether she was genuinely ill is up for debate. What isn't debatable is Dyer's increasing confidence and cruelty. When drugging and starving babies proved too time-consuming and expensive, she resorted to suffocation or strangulation. Within hours of collecting a baby, Dyer would murder them. Forensics at that time were not yet developed, so they mistakenly thought that these were fetuses, without knowing that all were just covers for the terrible crimes of witch Amelia Dyer. In 1879, however, she came to the attention of a doctor. Suspicious about the number of death certificates he was asked to sign for young babies in the nurse's care. He reported her to the police and she was arrested. Astonishingly, Dyer was only found guilty of neglect and sentenced to 6 months of hard labor. When she was released, she found a job in a mental hospital. Here, she continued to play tricks to make a profit. The blood coins earned, she poured into alcohol and drugs. It gradually turned her into a demon. After that, she immediately returned to parenting but was careful never to involve the doctor again. In 1896, Dyer, her daughter Polly, and son-in-law Arthur moved to a house in Kensington, reading to practice, and had a colleague named Jane Granny Smith, an old friend at the orphanage. Amelia publishes extremely attractive and humane childcare ads in newspapers to hunt for missing mothers. Being very careful, Amelia did not let Jane know about her deeds and pretended to be a loving mother figure to shrug off any suspicion. In January 1896, Evelina Marmon, a waitress, accidentally gave birth to an illegitimate child. Amelia went to Evelina's house to receive payment and promised to send the child to a family in Reading who could afford to raise their child. A few days later, she impersonated the adoptive family and sent a letter to the poor mother with the content, "Everything is fine." But instead of taking the child to Reading, she went to her daughter Polly's house in London. There, she mercilessly strangled the baby with a white bandage and wrapped the baby's body in a tablecloth. She sold all of the baby's clothes and belongings to a pawn shop to get money. Luck continued to come to her when another prey appeared on her own. The child named Harry Simmons was the next victim to be brought to that warm home and was also murdered by the way she did with Evelina's child. She then wrapped the two corpses together with some bricks and went to a remote stretch of the Thames to drop them into the river. At the same time, a dead child, later identified as Helena Fry, was discovered in the Thames, which flows through Reading. Detectives quickly got in and tracked down the name, Thomas, along with an address. During the investigation, the police found that the cave of the witch, Amelia Dyer, but there was still not enough evidence to prosecute. Fearing that the witch would apparate if discovered they were under surveillance, they decided to use a young woman as bait. But Amelia was also very cunning when she discovered that she was being followed by detectives. Mission fail. On April 3, police entered the apartment that Amelia was renting on Kensington Street, Reading to search. They only smelled a strong burning smell throughout the room but did not find a body. Instead, they found some other important evidence such as criminal tapes, pawn bills, letters from the mother asking about her children. Immediately, she was arrested and taken to the station. The River Thames was dredged and more bodies were retrieved. Realizing that she was not responsible for all of the discovered bodies, the wicked baby farmer pointed out that she was only guilty of the babies strangled with white tape. Dyer was arrested and confessed to murder, but not before she convinced police that her daughter and son-in-law were not involved in her crimes. Took the court less than 6 minutes to declare her guilty, and she was sentenced to death by hanging. During the trial, she somehow tried to save herself by trying to prove that she was insane, but it was later proved by the authorities that it was just her ploy to save herself from the death sentence. During the 3 weeks' time before the sentence was to be carried out, she confessed to all the murders in front of a chaplain. She was hanged at Newgate Prison on June 10, 1896. Her last words were, "I have nothing to say." Her sentence was carried out by James Billington at 9 a.m. Carved wooden crosses hung by the people of Reading along the railings of the Clappers footbridge. Since then, this place has become a memorial to the unfortunate children harmed in the most terrible tragedy of the 19th century in England.